Brookhaven, Mississippi, a town where life moved slow but whispers traveled fast. On a sweltering August evening, Sheriff Donovan Marshall sat alone in his dimly lit office, the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan doing little to cut through the thick summer air. His badge gleamed under the flickering light, a symbol of the law he had upheld for nearly 2 decades. But tonight, it wasn't the criminals on the streets that troubled him. His phone buzzed on the desk, a single voicemail waiting to be played. "You think you can hide forever? I know everything." The voice was low, deliberate, and unmistakable. His heart sank. Sheriff Marshall wasn't just a man of the law. He was a husband, a protector, and lately, a man with a secret, one that could destroy everything he had built. But this was a threat he hadn't seen coming. For years, Brookhaven trusted him to protect their town, to be the pillar of order in their close-knit community. What no one knew was that the most dangerous storm wasn't on the streets. It was inside his own home. This is the story of how a respected sheriff, his loyal wife, and her charming younger sister became entangled in a web of betrayal and lies, a story that ended in obsession, deceit, and murder. Sheriff Donovan Marshall was the kind of man people trusted instinctively. At 48 years old, he had dedicated nearly 2 decades to serving and protecting the small, tightly knit town of Brookhaven. His reputation was spotless, his integrity unshakable. Or so it seemed. He wore his badge with pride, and the people of Brookhaven looked to him not only for safety, but also for guidance. But like the strongest of walls, cracks can form where no one thinks to look. At home, Donovan was a husband of 15 years to Gloria Marshall. Gloria was everything a man could want in a partner: loyal, thoughtful, and perceptive. She worked as a high school guidance counselor, known for her empathetic nature and sharp intuition. Students admired her, and parents trusted her. Gloria carried herself with a quiet grace, often putting Donovan's needs above her own. Yet beneath her composed exterior, there was an edge, an intuition honed over years of watching teenagers lie to her face and uncovering truths they wished to hide. It was this same skill that would later make her the first to sense that something in her own marriage wasn't right. Their lives took an unexpected turn when Gloria's younger sister, Ayanna Porter, arrived in town. Ayanna, 30 and newly divorced, was everything Gloria wasn't: bold, magnetic, and unapologetically ambitious. A real estate agent by trade, Ayanna had a way of making people feel seen, but her charm often masked her recklessness. Her divorce had been a scandal in her previous city, fueled by rumors of infidelity and financial disputes. Brookhaven was supposed to be her fresh start, and Gloria, ever the compassionate sister, offered her a place to stay until she got back on her feet. Ayanna's presence in the Marshall home was impossible to ignore. She brought a spark of energy that contrasted sharply with Gloria's calm demeanor. Within weeks, she had charmed half the town, from local shop owners to Donovan's colleagues at the station. She would flash her dazzling smile, make a witty remark, and people would fall over themselves to help her. But for all her charisma, Ayanna harbored a quiet resentment, one that had festered for years. To the outside world, Gloria had the perfect life: a stable marriage, a respectable career, and a husband who adored her. Ayanna, on the other hand, felt like the perennial black sheep, always living in her sister's shadow. Their sibling rivalry wasn't new. It stretched back to their childhood. Ayanna had always been the risk-taker, the one who sought attention in ways that Gloria never did. Flashbacks to their youth would reveal moments of competition and envy, Gloria excelling in school, while Ayanna struggled to find her footing. Gloria receiving praise from their parents, while Ayanna was often dismissed as too much. Those early years laid the groundwork for a relationship that was polite on the surface but strained underneath. When Ayanna moved in, those old dynamics resurfaced. Gloria tried her best to be supportive, offering advice and helping Ayanna network in Brookhaven's real estate market. But Ayanna's carefree attitude often grated on Gloria's nerves. Ayanna would leave her shoes in the hallway, forget to clean up after herself, and monopolize conversations during family dinners. Gloria bit her tongue, wanting to be the supportive sister, but the tension was palpable. For Donovan, however, Ayanna's arrival was a breath of fresh air. She was lively, funny, and full of stories that broke up the monotony of his predictable days. Ayanna had a way of making people feel special, and Donovan was no exception. At first, Their interactions were innocent, just friendly banter over dinner or casual chats when Gloria wasn't around. But as weeks turned into months, something shifted. Ayanna began to confide in Donovan, sharing stories of her failed marriage and the loneliness she felt starting over in a new town. She would linger a little longer in the kitchen when Donovan made his coffee, or strike up conversations late at night when Gloria had gone to bed. She spoke of her ex-husband's betrayal, the financial ruin he had left her in, and how she felt undeserving of love. Donovan listened, at first out of politeness, but soon out of genuine interest. Gloria noticed the way Ayanna gravitated toward Donovan, but she brushed it off. She's just lonely, Gloria told herself. She needs someone to talk to. After all, Donovan was her husband, the man she trusted above all else. But Gloria's intuition, the same skill that made her an excellent counselor, nagged at her. She began to observe more closely. The way Ayanna laughed a little too loudly at Donovan's jokes, the way Donovan seemed more attentive to his appearance when Ayanna was around, and the unspoken tension that hung in the air whenever the three of them were together. The cracks in their seemingly perfect lives were forming, but no one could see just how deep they would go. Late one night, when the house was quiet and Gloria had gone to bed, Donovan found himself in the living room, staring at the dim glow of the TV. Ayanna appeared, her footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. She wore a loose sweater and jeans, her usual vibrant demeanor replaced by something quieter, more subdued. "Can't sleep?" Donovan asked, his voice low to avoid waking Gloria. Ayanna shook her head and sat down across from him. "It's hard sometimes," she said, her voice tinged with melancholy. "Starting over, I mean. I feel like I've lost everything. My marriage, my home, my sense of direction." Donovan listened, his instinct to protect and reassure kicking in. "You'll figure it out," he replied. "You're strong, Ayanna. You've been through worse." Her eyes met his, and for a moment there was silence. "You really think so?" she asked, her tone almost childlike. "Sometimes I feel like I'll never get back on my feet." That night marked the first of many late-night conversations. Ayanna confided in Donovan about her failed marriage, her feelings of inadequacy, and her fear of being alone. Donovan, ever the protector, offered her the kind of reassurance she craved. He told himself it was harmless, that he was simply being a good brother-in-law. But the line between brotherly concern and something more was beginning to blur. As the weeks went by, their interactions grew more frequent and more intimate. Ayanna started seeking Donovan out during the day, finding excuses to talk to him or ask for his help. She'd casually mention needing advice on a property she was listing, or drop by the station under the pretense of delivering lunch to him and Gloria. Donovan told himself these encounters were coincidental, but deep down, he knew better. One afternoon, Ayanna suggested they visit a local property she was preparing to list. "I need a second opinion," she said, flashing him a smile. "You're good at reading people. Tell me what you think buyers will see." Donovan hesitated. It wasn't the kind of favor he usually did for his family, but something about Ayanna's tone made it hard to refuse. The visit was quick, but the time alone felt different. Ayanna was attentive, asking about his work, his life, and even his dreams. She laughed at his jokes in a way that made him feel like the most interesting man in the world. And for the first time in years, Donovan felt truly seen. But with this newfound connection came guilt. Donovan loved Gloria. She had been his rock through the highs and lows of life. Yet Ayanna had awakened something in him, a sense of excitement and vitality that he hadn't felt in years. He tried to push the feelings away, but Ayanna's presence made it impossible. Ayanna, for her part, knew exactly what she was doing. She played the role of the vulnerable younger sister perfectly, knowing that Donovan's protective nature would draw him closer to her. She feigned admiration, praising his strength, his dedication, and his loyalty to his family. She even dropped hints of how much she envied Gloria for having a husband like him. Every word, every gesture, was calculated to deepen her hold on him. Gloria, meanwhile, began noticing changes in Donovan. He was spending more time at the station, or so he claimed. He seemed distracted at home, often lost in thought. And then there were the small but telling signs, like how he had started paying more attention to his appearance, wearing cologne he hadn't used in years, or how he seemed unusually tense whenever Ayanna was around. One evening, while doing the laundry, Gloria found something that made her heart stop. A receipt tucked into Donovan's pocket. It was for an expensive necklace from a jewelry store downtown, something Donovan hadn't mentioned to her. She stared at it, her mind racing. He hadn't bought her jewelry in years, and there was no special occasion coming up. So, who was it for? Gloria didn't confront Donovan right away. Instead, she slipped the receipt back where she found it and resolved to watch more closely. Something was happening in her home, something she couldn't yet put into words, and for the first time in 15 years, Gloria began to doubt the man she thought she knew. The town of Brookhaven awoke to shocking news on a crisp October morning. Ayanna Porter, a rising star in the local real estate market and the younger sister of Gloria Marshall, had been found dead. Her body was discovered on the outskirts of town, in a secluded area near the woods. A jogger, out for an early run, spotted something unusual, a figure lying motionless among the fallen leaves. The call to 911 came just after sunrise. The scene was grim. Ayanna lay sprawled on the ground, her arms slightly outstretched, as though she had been reaching for something, or someone. Around her neck was a silk scarf, the ends knotted tightly. It was a pale shade of blue, and upon closer inspection, the detectives learned it wasn't just any scarf. It was a personal item Gloria had given Ayanna as a gift when she first moved to Brookhaven. The medical examiner's initial findings were sobering. Ayanna had been strangled. The scarf used as the weapon. Time of death was estimated to be between 9 and 11 p.m. the previous night. There were no signs of sexual assault, no defensive wounds, and little indication of a struggle. Whoever had killed Ayanna had done so swiftly and with chilling precision. News of Ayanna's death spread quickly through the small town, and speculation began almost immediately. People whispered about who could have committed such a heinous act. As the investigation unfolded, one name surfaced again and again: Sheriff Donovan Marshall. Donovan's connection to Ayanna was no secret. He had been seen with her often, sometimes in casual settings, sometimes in what witnesses described as moments of quiet intimacy. The rumors had started innocently enough, neighbors noticing Ayanna stopping by the station or spotting her and Donovan chatting on the porch while Gloria wasn't home. But now, in the wake of Ayanna's death, those observations took on a far darker tone. The first major piece of evidence came from a witness who claimed to have seen Donovan's truck parked near the area where Ayanna's body was found. The witness, a farmer heading home after a late night tending to his livestock, described the vehicle as unmistakable: a dark blue pickup with distinctive mud-splattered tires. While the farmer couldn't confirm the exact time he saw the truck, his statement placed Donovan at the scene during the window of Ayanna's death. When questioned by detectives, Donovan's responses were vague. He claimed to have been at the station, catching up on paperwork. But when pressed for details, his story began to unravel. The station's security cameras showed no record of Donovan entering or leaving during the critical hours. His colleagues mentioned that he had left early, saying he needed to check on a personal matter. To the investigators, this wasn't just suspicious, it was damning. The second piece of evidence came from a forensic sweep of Donovan's truck. Detectives found traces of Ayanna's perfume, an unmistakable floral scent with hints of vanilla, that lingered on the passenger seat. The scent was strong enough to suggest that Ayanna had been in the truck recently, likely on the night of her death. Donovan couldn't explain it. He stumbled through his words, offering vague excuses that only deepened the investigators' suspicions. And then there were the text messages. Investigators obtained Ayanna's phone records and discovered a series of exchanges between her and Donovan. The messages started innocently enough, updates about her real estate listings, questions about local events, but quickly became more personal. In one message, Ayanna thanked Donovan for being her rock and wrote that she didn't know what she would do without him. In another, she hinted at wanting to talk about their future. The texts painted a picture of a relationship that went far beyond the boundaries of a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. When detectives confronted Donovan with the evidence, he denied everything. He insisted the texts were misunderstood, that Ayanna had simply been going through a difficult time and leaned on him for support. As for the truck, he claimed he often gave Ayanna rides to showings or other errands. But the investigators weren't buying it. His nervous demeanor, The inconsistencies in his alibi, and the mounting evidence all pointed in one direction. Donovan had something to hide. The discovery of Ayanna's death and the suspicion surrounding Donovan sent shockwaves through the Marshall household. Gloria, devastated by the loss of her sister, struggled to reconcile her grief with the growing doubts about her husband. She had known Donovan for 15 years, trusted him with her life, but now she couldn't ignore the signs she had seen leading up to this moment. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the receipt for the necklace, all of it now seemed to fit into a pattern she had been too afraid to acknowledge. As the investigation deepened, Brookhaven's once revered sheriff found himself at the center of a storm. The question wasn't just who had killed Ayanna, it was why. And while Donovan claimed his innocence, the evidence told a different story. But the truth, as the investigators were about to learn, was far more complex than anyone could have imagined. The investigation into Ayanna Porter's death shifted into high gear as detectives Maya Colton and Terrence Hollis were assigned to the case. Both seasoned investigators with years of experience handling complex homicides, they approached the scene with methodical precision. Colton was sharp, methodical, and known for her ability to dissect a suspect's story. Hollis, slightly younger, relied on instinct and observation, often catching subtle cues others missed. Their initial focus remained on Sheriff Donovan Marshall. The evidence against him was compelling. The scent of Ayanna's perfume in his truck, the witness statement placing his vehicle near the crime scene, and those personal text messages exchanged with Ayanna. Still, as experienced detectives, they knew that the obvious suspect wasn't always the guilty one. "Let's start from the beginning," Colton had said, standing over the caseboard pinned with photos of the crime scene. "Work the facts. Then we'll see if his story holds." The first step was retracing Ayanna's final hours. Surveillance footage from her real estate office showed her leaving just before 7 p.m. the night of her death. She wasn't scheduled for any client meetings that evening. According to Gloria, Ayanna had mentioned needing to clear her head and go for a drive. Her phone records showed outgoing texts to Donovan shortly before 9 p.m., the same night he claimed to have been working at the station. However, a closer examination of the station's security system revealed something critical: a camera glitch. The footage had skipped from 8:57 p.m. to nearly 10:20 p.m., leaving a window of time unaccounted for. Hollis raised an eyebrow, making a note on his pad. "Convenient," he murmured. The inconsistencies mounted, yet the timeline still wasn't airtight. To build a clearer picture of Ayanna's life, the detectives expanded their scope. They interviewed her colleagues at the real estate agency and former friends in Brookhaven. It didn't take long for patterns to emerge. Ayanna had a way of drawing people in, but many described her as unpredictable, even reckless. A former colleague mentioned how Ayanna had once exaggerated a medical emergency to get out of a client dispute. Another mentioned tension between Ayanna and a former business partner over missing funds. Then came the interview with Ayanna's ex-husband, Kieran Porter. A reserved man with a distant gaze, Kieran initially seemed reluctant to speak, but Colton's steady, non-confrontational approach eventually drew him out. "Ayanna, she was complicated," he said, his voice tight. "Charming, yes, but it was always about control with her. If you gave her attention, she took it. If you didn't, she made sure you felt it." When asked about their divorce, Kieran revealed a critical detail. Ayanna had manipulated him financially. "She took out a joint loan without my knowledge. I only found out when the debt collectors showed up. And when I confronted her, she said I'd never prove it was her." The pieces were starting to shift. Ayanna wasn't just a victim. She had a history of manipulation. But was it enough to justify her death? Colton and Hollis returned to the Marshall home. They interviewed Gloria again, noting her calm demeanor. She seemed heartbroken yet composed, her voice never wavering. But there was something calculated in her responses. She mentioned how close Donovan and Ayanna had become, but was careful to avoid sounding accusatory. Then came a breakthrough. A junior officer had been assigned to double-check Donovan's whereabouts the night of the murder. Upon further review, the station's manual log, separate from the glitching camera footage, showed that Donovan had indeed signed in shortly before 9 p.m. and didn't leave until nearly midnight. Several officers on duty corroborated his presence during that time. The confirmation shifted everything. He couldn't have done it, Hollis said, scanning the evidence wall. So who else had access to Ayanna that night? The focus turned back to Gloria. She had admitted seeing her sister earlier that week, but denied any contact the night of the murder. Yet bank records told a different story. A forensic analysis of Gloria's financial activity revealed a series of cash withdrawals over the past 3 weeks, small amounts that totaled just over $2,500. What stood out, though, was a purchase at a local boutique just days before Ayanna's death. The item? A pale blue silk scarf. The same scarf used in the murder. The detectives confronted Gloria with the findings. She didn't flinch when they presented the receipts, but offered a carefully crafted response. "I bought it for Ayanna as a gift," she said. "She had admired mine, so I thought it would be a nice gesture. I gave it to her last week." But then came a more damning discovery. Surveillance footage from Ayanna's apartment complex showed Gloria entering the building the night before the murder. She stayed for just under an hour and left carrying what appeared to be a small box. When questioned, Gloria claimed she was simply dropping off personal items for her sister. But when detectives searched Ayanna's apartment, no such box was found. Hollis exchanged a glance with Colton. Something doesn't add up. She's lying, but why? The picture was shifting yet again. Donovan's affair had been a distraction, a red herring that almost led the investigation astray. The focus was now firmly on Gloria, a woman who had not only lied about her whereabouts but had made financial moves that suggested premeditation. And as the evidence closed in, the detectives began to wonder. Was Ayanna truly the victim of a crime of passion? Or had someone carefully planned her death long before the night she was found? The truth was getting closer. But the most shocking revelations were still to come. The interrogation room was silent, except for the faint hum of the overhead fluorescent lights. Gloria Marshall sat at the metal table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her expression was calm, composed, but not indifferent. She had agreed to come in voluntarily, maintaining her cooperation with the investigation. Yet, detectives Maya Colton and Terrence Hollis knew they were on the edge of something far more revealing. Colton began softly, her tone more conversational than accusatory. "Mrs. Marshall, we need to clear up a few discrepancies in your statements. You've been truthful so far, but these details," she gestured to the file in front of her, "they don't match up with what we've found." Gloria raised her eyes, meeting Colton's gaze steadily. "What details?" she asked, her voice even. Hollis leaned forward, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. "The scarf, for one," he said. "You told us you gave it to Ayanna last week, but her colleagues never saw her wear it. In fact, the only time it appeared was the night she was killed. And then there's the footage, your visit to her apartment the night before. What were you really doing there?" For a moment, Gloria said nothing. Her face betrayed no emotion, no crack in her carefully maintained composure. But Colton noticed the slight twitch in her fingers, the subtle tension in her jaw. "I went to drop off some things," Gloria said finally, "personal items she'd left behind." Colton nodded, her voice remaining calm. "You see, that's the part that confuses us. We didn't find any of those items in her apartment. What we did find, though, was evidence that points to you being the last person to see her alive. And then there's this." She slid a photograph across the table, a still frame from the apartment's surveillance footage. It showed Gloria leaving the building with a small box. "Where did this box go, Mrs. Marshall?" Gloria's calm exterior began to falter. Her lips parted slightly as though she wanted to speak, but no words came. Hollis pressed on. "You don't need to protect anyone," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Whatever happened, we need to know the truth. This is your chance to explain." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Gloria exhaled, her shoulders sagging as though the weight of the past few weeks had finally become too much to bear. "You're right," she said quietly. "I was the last person to see Ayanna alive." Colton and Hollis exchanged a brief glance, their expressions unreadable. Colton leaned in slightly, giving Gloria the space to continue. "I found the receipt," Gloria began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "For the necklace. I knew it wasn't for me. I confronted Donovan, and he denied everything, said it was nothing, just a mistake. But I knew better. I've known him for 15 years. He's not a good liar." She paused, her gaze dropping to her hands. That night, I went to Ayana's apartment. I needed answers. I needed to hear it from her. Colton's voice was soft, almost encouraging. And what happened when you got there? Gloria's hands tightened into fists. She didn't even try to deny it, she said bitterly. She smiled, actually smiled, and said she'd never seen Donovan so alive. She told me he deserved better than me, that I was boring, predictable, and that I'd never be enough for him. Her voice cracked, and for the first time a tear slid down her cheek. I told her to stay away from my family, to leave Brookhaven and never come back. But she just laughed. She said Donovan wasn't the first married man she'd been with, and he wouldn't be the last. She said she could take everything from me if she wanted to. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of Gloria's uneven breathing. Hollis spoke gently, his tone devoid of judgment. What happened next? Gloria closed her eyes, her voice dropping to a whisper. I didn't plan it. I swear I didn't. I just wanted her to stop. She kept laughing, saying things I can't even repeat. I saw the scarf on the couch, and before I knew it, her voice trailed off. Colton's tone was calm but firm. You strangled her. Gloria nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. It was quiet, she said, and when it was over, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I took the box with her things, left the apartment, and drove around for hours. I thought if I left her somewhere, someone else would find her, and it would look like a robbery or an attack. Hollis leaned back, processing her words. And the scarf? You left it there intentionally? Gloria hesitated before nodding. I thought, if anyone suspected Donovan, it would buy me time. I needed time to figure out what to do. The room fell silent again. Gloria's confession hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her actions. Colton broke the quiet. Why, Gloria? She asked softly. Why not just walk away? Why take it this far? Gloria met her gaze, her voice trembling. Because she wouldn't stop. She destroyed her own marriage and she was destroying mine. She was like a disease infecting everything she touched. I couldn't let her ruin my family, not after everything I've built with Donovan. I had to protect what was mine. Her words were chilling in their conviction. It was clear she believed, on some level, that what she had done was justified. Hollis closed the file in front of him. You know this doesn't end here, he said, his voice steady. Your actions don't just affect you. This is going to change everything. For Donovan, for your family. Gloria nodded, tears still falling. I know, she whispered. But at least now it's over. As Colton and Hollis left the room, the weight of Gloria's confession settled over them. It was a story of betrayal, desperation, and choices that couldn't be undone. Gloria had justified her actions as an act of protection, but in the end, it was her own family she had destroyed. The courtroom's final echo faded as the gavel struck, sealing Gloria Marshall's fate. Once known as the reserved and supportive wife of Sheriff Donovan Marshall, was found guilty of second-degree murder. Her confession, combined with the overwhelming evidence, left little room for doubt. 20 years behind bars for the murder of her sister, Ayana Porter. No parole, no appeals. A punishment that fit the crime. But did it bring justice? Donovan, seated in the back of the courtroom, couldn't bring himself to look at her. The woman he had loved for 15 years, the woman he thought he knew, had taken a life in an attempt to protect their family. But in doing so, she had destroyed it. As the judge announced the sentence, Donovan rose quietly and walked out of the courtroom, his steps heavy with shame and regret. Her once quiet and respected life now reduced to a tragic headline. A wife who claimed to protect her family, but in the end tore it apart forever. And Donovan? The man at the center of it all? He was left shattered, his marriage destroyed, his career lost, and his guilt a burden he couldn't shake. He resigned as sheriff just days after the verdict, his once proud reputation in Brookhaven forever stained. Some said he fled the town not out of shame, but because he couldn't face the reminders. The looks, the whispers, the memory of the home he shared with Gloria, now empty and silent. Weeks passed, then months, until one evening, on the banks of a quiet river far from Brookhaven, Donovan stood alone. In his hand, the necklace he had once bought for Ayana, the symbol of a mistake he could never undo. He stared at the golden chain for a long moment, the sun setting behind him, casting long shadows across the rippling water. Then, with a heavy breath, he let it fall. The necklace disappeared beneath the current, the ripples expanding, echoing the consequences of choices made and secrets kept. In Brookhaven, secrets rarely stay buried for long. But the truth? Sometimes it leaves a scar far deeper than the crime itself. But as we close this chapter, there are questions that remain, ones without easy answers. Was Gloria a villain, or a woman pushed to the edge by betrayal and heartbreak? Could Donovan have prevented this tragedy? Or was his guilt a symptom of something much deeper? And perhaps the hardest question of all, can justice ever truly heal the wounds left behind by such a devastating loss? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and share, because stories like these remind us how fragile trust can be, and how far people will go when it's broken.